What if I told you that playing the guitar, going fishing, or building something in your workshop could actually make you a more successful designer and increase your business performance by 30%? Curious? Stick around to find out what I'm talking about. Hey there, my friends. Welcome to Resourceful Designer, your source for building a better design business. I'm your host, Mark Decote. And today we're talking about something that might seem counterintuitive at first, how taking time away from your design business can actually make you more successful. Stay with me here, because what I'm about to share could significantly enhance both your creativity and your business performance. Let me start with a story that really drove this point home for me. Last week, I was talking with Stephanie, a web designer I met at WordCamp Canada last year. Stephanie shared an interesting experience with me. She was going through a slower period in her business, as we all go through from time to time, and she was between projects. Well, the sun was shining that day, and instead of spending it in front of her computer, Stephanie decided to take advantage of what might be one of the last beautiful fall days here in Ontario. Now, although I've never seen it, Stephanie tells me that she has quite the garden, big enough to keep her family well stocked with seasonal vegetables. And on this particular beautiful day, Stephanie decided to spend time in that garden. Now, most of the harvesting had already been done, so she planned on using the time to get the ground ready for next year. Now, this is the important part of the story. While Stephanie was tending to her garden, her phone started buzzing with quote-unquote urgent messages from one of her clients. Now, like many of us would, her first instinct was to take off her gardening gloves and start responding to the messages. But then she remembered something important that she had heard on an episode of Pat Flynn's Smart Passive Income podcast. It was a conversation he'd had with entrepreneur Chris Ducker about how entrepreneurs with hobbies actually outperform those without hobbies by up to 30%. And you know what she did? Instead of responding to the messages, she pretended like she had never seen them, she turned off her phone, and she kept tending to her garden. Now here's the interesting part. That afternoon, while pulling weeds, not only did she make good headway on her garden, but she also had a breakthrough idea for a personal project she had been stuck on. Now, coincidentally, I had also listened to that episode of Smart Passive Income. It's one of the podcasts that I listen to on a regular basis. And I had found it interesting, but I hadn't really given it much thought afterwards. However, after hearing Stephanie's story, it prompted me to reflect on how we, as designers, approach our work-life balance. And reflecting on the topic of hobbies and design prompted me to consider my own pastimes. Those of you who've listened to the podcast for a while know that I love woodworking, although I don't spend nearly as much time doing it as I would like to. Well, a few weeks ago, I was working on a simple cutting board project. It was nothing fancy. I had some scrap pieces of wood and decided to make something useful out of them. And here's what struck me about that situation. As I was working with my hands, completely disconnected from my computer and my design work, my mind started wandering to a client project I had been struggling with. You see, I had been trying to figure out a shipping issue for a client's e-commerce website. There was something particular that this client wanted to happen, and I was trying to figure out how to get that done. Now, there were several solutions available, but most of them were way beyond my client's budget or were just way too complicated for what I actually needed it to do. But there I was, sanding this cutting board, and suddenly the solution just popped into my head out of nowhere. It was simple. It was a free solution that wouldn't cost my client anything, and it was something that I had completely overlooked. And when I implemented it, it worked perfectly for my client, and they loved it. Now, this isn't just a coincidence. There's actually science behind why this happens. Research shows that when we step away from our screens and we engage in activities that have nothing to do with design, our brains enter what scientists call the quote-unquote default mode network. Think of it like your brain's creative background processor. It keeps on working on a problem even when you're not actively thinking about it. And hobbies are the perfect catalyst for this to happen. Now, here's something fascinating I learned from that Smart Passive Income podcast. is that studies have found that entrepreneurs who engage in creative hobbies for just 2 hours per week see a 30% boost in their work performance. 30%. Think about what that could mean for your design business. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Well, Mark, I barely have time to keep up with my client work. How am I supposed to find time for hobbies? I hear you. In fact, this reminds me of a conversation I had with one of my resourceful designer community members. He was feeling overwhelmed with his workload and thought taking on time for hobbies would just add more stress. But here's the thing, and this is backed by research. When we don't take time for activities outside of design, we're actually making ourselves less efficient. It's kind of like driving a car without ever stopping for gas. Sure, you might keep going on for a while, but eventually you're going to run out of fuel. Now let me share another quick story. Several years ago, I was working with a client on a massive website redesign project. The deadline was tight and it was coming up fast, and I found myself working longer and longer hours. And I was actually skipping my usual 9 to 5 work days. And if you know me, you know that I'm adamant 9 to 5 is what I work. But on this project, I was working evenings and I did some time on weekends. I was completely skipping any sort of me time. And in my mind, I was doing this to be more productive. But the more I worked, the harder it became to come up with fresh ideas. The design started feeling stale, and I was taking longer and longer to complete tasks that should have actually come easily to me. Then, almost by accident, I ended up having to take a break. On one particular day I was working on this project, my daughter wasn't feeling well, and she ended up staying home from high school. And she asked if I could help her with a school project. She had to build a model bridge out of popsicle sticks for her physics class, and she needed to make it so that it would be as long as she can possibly make it, but it still had to be able to hold the weight of a bowling ball. Now, knowing that my daughter would be going off to college the following year, and that father-daughter time is very limited, I decided to forget about this web project and spend the afternoon with her, just playing around with different construction ideas. Now, don't worry, I didn't take over the whole thing. I let her make her own choices. I was just there for suggestions and, of course, an extra pair of hands. Now, I recall that when I returned to my design work the next day, everything just seemed to flow more smoothly. The solutions I'd been struggling with suddenly seemed obvious, and I was able to complete the project easily well before the deadline. Now, this experience lines up perfectly with what researchers have discovered about creative professionals and burnout. Studies show that about 43% of freelancers are prone to burnout, and designers are particularly vulnerable because our work requires consistent creative output. And that can take a toll. Having to be constantly creative is hard work. But here's what's really interesting. That same research shows that the most beneficial hobbies for designers are often those that are least like our daily work. If you spend all day working in a digital space, activities that engage your hands and physical senses can be particularly powerful for that creative recovery that we all need so badly. For example, woodworking or other crafts that involve physical creation, gardening like Stephanie, which operates on natural time cycles rather than project deadlines, music, which engages completely different parts of your brain. Man, I wish I was musical, but I don't have a musical bone in my body. Physical activities like running or cycling. Even cooking could be an incredibly effective creative outlet. The key is finding activities that genuinely interest you and have nothing to do with client work or design. Remember that cutting board I mentioned earlier? It's sitting in my kitchen right now, and every time I use it, it reminds me of the creative breakthrough it helped inspire. And here's a crucial point. These hobbies, they aren't just about having fun or relaxing, though those are great benefits and worth doing them on their own just for that. But they're also strategic tools for enhancing your creative capacity, and ultimately, that means your business success. Think about it. If taking time for hobbies could help you work more efficiently, come up with better ideas faster, and reduce your risk of burnout, wouldn't that make it worth prioritizing? Now, before I wrap up, let me give you 3 actionable steps you can take this week to start implementing what we've just discussed. Number 1, schedule your hobby time. Block out at least 2 hours this week for a non-design related activity, something that you enjoy. Put it on your calendar and treat it as if it's a client meeting, something that's non-negotiable. 2, create physical boundaries. When you're engaging in your hobby, put your phone in airplane mode or leave it in another room. Remember, this isn't just quote-unquote free time. It's strategic recovery time for your creative brain. That's what Stephanie did. She turned off her phone, worked on her garden, and had a creative breakthrough. 3, track your results. Keep a simple note of how you feel after your hobby time and any creative breakthroughs or improved client interactions you notice. This will help you see the concrete benefits of this practice. And here's a quick tip for my fellow home-based designers. Set up a dedicated space for your hobby that's completely separated from your work area. Adding a physical separation helps your brain make the switch from work mode to recovery mode much more efficiently. Remember, taking time for hobbies isn't being selfish or unprofessional. It's actually a strategic business decision that can make you a better designer and a better business owner. Now, if you're enjoying this content and want to connect with other designers who are building successful businesses, I'd love to invite you to join the Resourceful Designer community. Head over to resourcefuldesigner.com/community to join today. And I would love to hear what hobbies you're pursuing or planning on starting. Share your thoughts in the community or reach out to me on social media or by email at feedback@resourcefuldesigner.com and let me know what you're up to. And by the way, my daughter came in second place for her popsicle stick bridge. It did hold the bowling ball, but one of her classmates' bridge was just a few centimeters longer than hers, and they took first place. And it turned out that those quote-unquote urgent messages from Stephanie's clients weren't that urgent after all. She was able to address them the following day, and her client was very happy, and so was Stephanie. So that's it for this episode of Resourceful Designer. I am Mark Decote, and until next time, stay creative. And remember, sometimes the best thing you can do for your design business is to step away from it. Here's another one of Wayne Henderson's Resourceful Designer intros. If you're looking for a voiceover artist, be sure to visit mediavoiceovers.com. Go Leafs, go!
And now, your host. His second favorite sport after hockey is football, as in soccer, not the American game. Mark Decote.